What's up, everyone? This is Rob Yates, Director of Communications for OWL ESG. I'm here, as always, with my partner in crime, Nate Najaro, for Armchair ESG with Nate and Yates. How you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing great. How are you, Rob?
Oh, I'm feeling fantastic, man. It's summertime's coming,
That's right.
weather's warming up, beach. I got a little bit of sun,
Happy
but I was
Father's Day.
outside. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Happy Father's Day to you, brother.
Thank you very much, and a happy Father's Day to you as well.
Thank you.
But sitting outside, bringing my water bottle. I got my water bottle right here, and it is made of course, the topic du jour, plastic.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
plastic is a catch all term for a whole bunch of different things: resin, epoxy, polyethylene terephthalate. I'm butchering that. PVC pipe is a plastic. Vinyl chloride records are made out of plastic. BPA that lines cans, bisphenol A is a type of plastic. Plastic is a major part of our lives, a major manufacturing breakthrough. It has revolutionized several industries, but with everything, with positives, there are always negatives. So, what are we looking at today?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and Rob, thank you for all the research you sent me on plastic. It's probably one of the areas that's the most interesting to me, but it's such a wide gamut, right? You talk about GHG emissions, only certain things really emit GHG in a way that we understand. But plastics, are you talking about single-use plastics that you get at the grocery store, or the plastic, on your computers, your phones, and all of that? So I think we're talking about all of it, but also trying to again take a reasonable approach and see what really needs to happen, or what we think needs, where the world is going. I think it's really around single-use plastics. Am I correct, Ron?
Well, so this is where it starts to get interesting. The
Yeah.
conversation that we're having around plastics is definitely around single-use plastics. You've heard
Yeah.
the plastic drinking straw bans. Certainly, you've seen efforts to reduce usage of plastic water bottles, plastic soda bottles, and it's focused on the consumer side.
Yep.
And and if you take a look at the chart up here, you can see that by a lot of measurements, single-use plastics, consumer side plastics are, in fact, the biggest source of plastic waste. But when you look at the biggest single source, and so the distinction is consumer plastics as a whole do make up the predominant component of plastic waste that goes into the ocean, but they're separated into these different categories. The biggest source of plastic waste in our environment, particularly in the ocean, is from the marine industry, fishing nets, which are made of a particular type of plastic.
Interesting.
And the nets get cut, they get dropped, they got thrown off of boats, and they collect, and they're the ones that really leach into the environment. These microplastics, which of course we're going to talk about too. Well, in the particular our particular discussion for today, again, OWL bringing you the most accurate, the most up to date, and the most transparent data, but also the most objective data. And so it is disingenuous simply to say plastics are bad. It's also disingenuous to say plastics are good. There are positives and negatives that are worth investigating, and that's what we want to discuss. And so as we start looking at the single-use plastics, the plastics accumulating in the ocean, we should be starting to talk about alternatives to provide the benefits that plastics provide.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things I want to go to as I was looking at the research is the crazy places where the micro traces of plastics are found, right? I was reading through them. Wow. I think we should touch on that as well. So, what, where is the craziest, like in your research, the craziest places where they found traces of microplastics?
Well, that really depends on what your definition of crazy is in this case, I suppose. We have found
Or most, not maybe crazy, but the most unlikely you would think. How did a microplastic get traced to that or in that?
well, and so that's a good point and a distinction that I was going to make, because to me the craziest places that they found it are in human blood, human lung tissue, and even in, let's just say, for the sake of a polite audience, dirty baby diapers. Um, So we are ingesting these microplastics, but they have now found both microplastics, plastic particles, and single-use plastic trash, plastic bags. They have found it at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, as
Hmm.
far as we know, by far the deepest place in the ocean on Earth. They have found it at the top of Mount Everest. They found it in untouched parts of the Rocky Mountains. They found it at the bottom of the famous Great Blue Hole in Belize.
Yeah.
There is almost no place on Earth untouched by plastics. They've found some plastic particles in Antarctica. Fortunately, from my reading, it appears that Antarctica has not been covered in plastics, but they have made it there.
Yeah. Well, one of the so Mount Everest, I could kind of, I'm thinking you're hiking up the mountain, maybe you have a plastic bag or a plastic bottle, and you just let it go. The crazy thing is how many dead people are on that ascent.
Yeah, that's
Not that are
most
that
people don't know
there. Yeah, like there's a lot of dead people on the
Yep.
climb to Mount Everest, and they just leave them here because it's too hard to get them down, and some of them there for years. Wow, but I can understand that with this great blue hole in Belize, right? I think the Discovery Channel did it with Richard Branson and Jacques Cousteau's grandson. And they found the plastics there. That's what's interesting because I'm like, divers they're not taking plastic bags with them down there, right? So, that was the most fascinating to me. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
In fact, the contrast of that image is really indicative of the ups and downs of plastic. So you couldn't have divers doing what they do, contemporary divers, without plastic. The tubing, the rubbers, the things they use, the way they're able to get much more efficient material that's much, much lighter, much more resistant to damage, enables them to go down to the bottom of the Great Blue Hole, which is, and I'm not a geography expert, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to understand why it was so difficult to dive in, but my understanding is it has something to do with water temperatures changing, and all of a sudden you get some pretty serious currents. But so yeah, like you said, Richard Branson, Jacques Cousteau's grandson, I think one other person made it down to the bottom, and what did they find? Plastic bags. So there it is, the plastic bags. They're finding the same material that enabled them to get there. The problem isn't the trash per se. Not that we want to be leaving trash all over the planet, but if it's just there, it isn't necessarily harming the environment. It's more looking bad.
Yeah.
The problem is that plastic takes a very, very long time to biodegrade, but it does break down into the microplastics that you alluded to. And that's what we're finding in our food supply, in our water, in our air, in our lung tissue. It's everywhere. And structurally, plastic is very similar to the hormone estrogen. And actually, the byproducts, when it breaks down, are even more similar to estrogen. So it wreaks havoc on the endocrine system. And we're just now learning how much havoc it could wreak. And you hear a lot of studies, they're all correlational. It's not ethical to pump people full of plastic particles and see what it does to them.
Yeah.
But it is a concern. They're popping up everywhere in our health and food chain ecosystem.
And I know that some countries have, really gone to paper and not banned plastic bags at the grocery store, and the movement that I see even here in Texas is, the reusable grocery bags where you go to Aldi's or whatever, just buy those. And, over the last few years, my family's done that too. And I'm the guilty party here trying to bring plastics in every once in a while. But, if I forget, I run out to the store. But I've seen that movement grow all over the United States, and especially in Europe. Over there, you really notice that people bring their own bags, to the grocery store and make sure that they're reusing that. So that can't be bad, right? That's what we want, is trying to keep those plastic bags, you know, out of the ocean.
So here's something interesting. I was and I don't know if the clip is copyrighted. So if you're watching this, you may get a video right after this as an interlude, you may not. But Saturday Night Live did a skit back in like 88 when plastic bags first became a thing. And it was a joking skit, but there was actually a significant debate over plastic bags versus paper bags.
Yeah.
And the big debate was which one is more environmentally friendly. Believe it or not, because plastic bags were seen as reasonable supplement or a reasonable replacement, I suppose, to prevent cutting down so many trees for the paper bags, which was one of the bigger environmental concerns at the time. Now obviously, I mean, not that clearing forest deforestation isn't a problem, but we have really implemented some effective recycling, sustainable foresting practices. You see a lot of large expanses of forest privately owned but limited, and so there's some industry actually taking initiative as opposed to being forced to do so. But yeah, so we switched to plastic bags, and obviously not just, hey, let's switch. There was some lobbying from the plastics industry, which industries will do that. um but we switched to plastic bags, and we did so because we thought it was going to be positive for the environment. Turns out, plastic takes a really, really long time to biodegrade.
Yeah.
These bags lasted in the environment for hundreds of years, sometimes longer. It's actually one of the properties of plastic, one of the reasons it works so well. But it's an interesting. So here's the whole key, and perhaps this is a good time to sort of throw in the objective side. So we plastics were we have used plastic adjacent products for hundreds of years. Rubber stuff has been around since like the 1600s, but it was in 1890 that we first really manufactured a plastic. And what we created was something that is strong, durable, flexible, really lightweight, resistant to infection, and resistant to electricity. And so it revolutionized manufacturing. It revolutionized automobiles. It revolutionized planes. It has completely revolutionized the healthcare industry. Granted, it's single use stuff, but because it's lightweight, cheap, and easy, you're not having to reuse materials. You're reducing infections significantly. It has revolutionized the music industry. Obviously, I'm a big vinyl record collector. Um, and even small things where there's trade-offs. So one of the plastic products that is generally considered to be sort of more dangerous than others is this bisphenol A that we mentioned at the beginning, BPA. And it very much mimics and is easily uptaken by your body as synthetic estrogen. It also leaches into the food. And that's the key. Bisphenol A is used to line food cans. But the reason it's used to line food cans is because it stops botulism. It used to be if you bought an aluminum or a tin can with food in it and it had a dent, you were running a risk of getting. It's a little more detailed than that, to be fair, but botulism was a problem. And the botulism toxin, made famous now by people who get Botox, but
Really?
it's, yeah, yeah. The
That's interesting.
botulism bacteria
Okay.
creates a toxin that's one of the deadliest substances to humans in existence. And in fact, a side note, but Botox works because it essentially kills the cells there, and that causes them to relax, so you don't have the wrinkles anymore. But so
Got it.
this, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how this works. So I think it was like 1974. I'm gonna get that wrong, but we started using BPA, and there hasn't been a single botulism death since in any country that uses it. Of course, we may be dramatically altering the workings of the endocrine systems in people that have been using these, but even there, it's like, so do you know why? You know how tomatoes often come in glass tomato sauce?
No, please do tell.
It's because tomatoes are highly acidic, and so they will leach extra BPA. So there has been some
Got
change
it.
over to using glass. But things like tomatoes, keeping them in heat, you want to store your cans in a cool, dark place, it's going to significantly reduce the exposure to BPA. Another place BPA is used is on cashier receipts. It's the coating.
Yeah.
So if you're going to the store even once a day, grocery store shopping, whatever it may be, you're fine. But if you're a cashier and you're handing one to people, again and again and again and again, there's a level of exposure to BPA over time that may be medically significant.
Interesting. I never thought about that. That is fascinating. I think there's a article you sent me about the immeasurable benefits of plastic to humanity, and that was a very interesting read. Maybe we can drop that in our notes for people to go along with some of the other stuff. But at the end of the day, Rob, it really comes down to balance, right? I know plastics have to exist in the world, right? Talking about medical technology and vehicles, how heavy our vehicles would be if we didn't use plastic. Oh, that's a good point. You probably consume more fossil fuels in the gas if you have heavier vehicles, and it's the law of unintended consequences. But that doesn't mean we can't attack this microplastic issue, reasonably, right? I think like the straws or the bags or things like that. It really comes down to being reasonable and attacking it in a reasonable fashion where you can't go, hey, you got to ban all plastics overnight. That's going to cause downward, effects that we haven't even thought about it. But what we do know about the single use, we can start attacking that. Is that reasonable?
I think it's eminently reasonable. I think to have a moderate, like rational discussion about this, we should explore both extremes, right? So on one extreme, you have the plastic industry funded lobby that says these are a miracle substance. There's no danger whatsoever. Use them all the time. And everything is just a panic button that people are pressing. Clearly not true. I mean, the research is overwhelming on this front. On the other side, you have people who are saying we need to ban all single-use plastics immediately. We need to find plastic substitutes for everything that has plastic. And like you said, I mean, it's not even practical. You would freeze instantly. You would freeze the healthcare industry. You'd see infections skyrocket. You would see the transportation industry completely redone, and not in a good way, in a very greenhouse gas intensive way, most likely. So a middle ground is looking for areas that we can have cost effective and efficient in terms of engineering and in operations substitutions for plastic where it makes sense. So I don't know, you see some people like, I'm never going to use a paper straw. All right, then just don't use a straw. Like, and not that not using straws is going to save the world, but not using a plastic straw is not some great act of defiance, and you don't have to call someone out for doing it. That seems sort of silly on one side.
Yep.
But I mean, you're starting to see, six packs have these new rings that aren't plastic. They're made of this biodegradable material, and a lot of it's actually biologically sourced. My understanding is like it's seaweed based, and it lasts for about 5 years. So you don't want to have a beverage product that's perishable sitting on the shelf for 5 years anyway. So some of the things that are meant for quicker turnover, yes, some plastic substitutes. Another one, like you mentioned, those grocery store, the tote bags instead of the plastic bags. I use them, and I've used them for 15 years. I got them in Hong Kong. We had them there. And it wasn't, I didn't even think about being environmental. For me, it was just, I didn't want all those plastic bags sitting around.
That's
like
right.
they did. Yep. Pile up pretty quickly.
Keep them in the car now. I just keep them in the trunk because I tend to walk out without them. So I told my wife, just keep them in the trunk, and then that way I do a stop.
Got them ready to go.
Got them ready to go. And I agree. It just makes sense that you can, and if everybody did that, I think you can make a big dent in it. So
then the other aspect to it, and this is where it's sort of a pick your poison, if you will, is the greenhouse gas emission component of the plastics industry. So first of all, plastics are crude oil based. I can't sit here and tell you for certain that every single plastic must be based on crude oil, but in terms of the research I did, I couldn't find examples that weren't. I don't want to say that it's 100% sure.
It's all petroleum based, absolutely.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's not a water based product. It's and then because of their durability, because of their structure, and there's a couple types of plastics, and the science gets complicated. Some of them have carbon chains, some of them don't. There's some are easier to recycle. Some of the ones that are food level safe, like I think it's like PET9 but they're more difficult to recycle. But there are processes, and some of them are called like pyrolysis, I believe, and gasification. And they involve high heats. Some have no oxygen, some have a little bit of oxygen. But we were making a sincere effort to recycle plastics, and believe it or not, the recycling of plastics initiatives increased a lot under Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going to get political about presidents. I will tell you, Trump wasn't looking to save on plastics. He was rolling back emission standards for other things because these can be pretty emissions intensive. So the EPA now under Biden has rolled back this rule. Well, I guess rolled back again, re-rolled back. I don't know what the term is for rolling back something that was rolled back. But the clean air protections have been reinstated for recycling the plastic waste. And so there's a lot less plastic that's going to be recycled as a result. So again, pick your poison. Do you want more emissions or do you want more plastic waste? Personally, you're asking me right now, I'm taking more emissions. I think we can handle more. I think the plastic is a more immediate problem. I think there are other ways to address emissions. I don't personally think emissions are a bad thing. I think too many emissions coming too fast are a bad thing, and that's a different conversation.
I agree.
But I think plastics in the environment for long periods of time are absolutely a bad thing. And if you want a visual of it, and if you take a look up on the screen right now, you can see the giant plastic patch in the Pacific Ocean. It's bigger than Texas, your home state. Imagine that. How long does it take you to drive from one city to the other?
I've driven from Houston to El Paso, and it feels like pretty much over half a day. So, I mean, it was. I think from Dallas to El Paso is like 9 hours. So you add Houston. I mean, it's a big thing. So you keep driving.
Imagine if that was just plastic trash.
Yeah. So no, it's insane.
The Great Pacific Patch is the famous one, but there's one in every single ocean.
Yeah. So that's a good segue. Have you heard of this guy named Boyan Slat, the Dutch kid that started ocean cleanup at 18? And he does the cleanup in the ocean, and he's just gotten a lot of traction over the last few years. So as I was prepping for this podcast, and I went out, I was like, I remember his TED Talk like in 2014 or 15, wherever it was. So the last name is Slat, S-L-A-T. First name is Boyan, B-O-Y-A-N. So look him up. I mean, this kid is making a dent. Okay, yeah, he sells his bracelet. This kid's making a dent in the ocean patches, and I think he has such an amazing goal, right? He says, our aim is to have removed 90% of floating ocean plastic by 2040. You talk about a clear cut.
What year, I'm sorry?
2040.
Wow, okay. 90%. That'd be an incredibly good thing for the planet.
Yeah, what were you doing at 18? I mean, cleaning up plastic in the ocean at 18?
To be recorded on this podcast, I'll tell you that.
Right, yeah, I mean, these young people are really, I mean, guys, look up oceancleanup.com. It's well worth reading through and seeing what they have there, but it's pretty phenomenal. We talk about this big ocean, what do we call it, the big patch, Pacific.
Even that, though, comes with consequences. And this is where things get crazy. There's an entire ecosystem that has formed around these plastic patches.
Really?
Yeah, animals have adapted. And one of the things that scientists have found that is really baffling and really interesting to them is that there's a lot of coastal animals, and I mean small crustaceans, the sorts of things that live in shallow water normally that have now found homes in this plastic, and it is changing the way we look at the migration of some of these animals. So are they making it out to the deep ocean? And normally they wouldn't survive. And what does that mean for the food chain? Are they catching a ride on seagulls? Are they hitching a ride on the plastic from the beginning? It's possible, and certainly there's litter on the coast, but a lot of this plastic is actually dumped by countries deliberately, because once you get outside a certain range, there's no restriction whatsoever.
Yeah. But I mean, so even going beyond the medical benefits, which that's important. Like I was thinking about the cashier or the person handling plastic every day, and even resonate with me. But I've been to you and I have traveled quite a bit of the world, and you go to the beautiful beaches, and then you go to the beaches where you're like, whoa, you don't want to step into this. And a lot of that is just plastic that have just accumulated and have just caused the water to be just nasty, and it stops water flow, and you get sedentary water that's disgusting. So I just think about, our kids, and we love to snorkel as a family. We've snorkeled all over the world, including the Caribbean, and I will never forget being at Megan's Bay in St. Thomas. You cannot bring I think glass or plastic. They're very strict about what you can bring on the beach. And I was swimming and we were doing it one day and we were just picking up plastic in the ocean. My kids and I just spent an afternoon, you know, just going in. There was very few on Megan's Bay. Now, some of the other places we went, we would just go down there and just, wrestle up plastic at the bottom of the ocean. But part of that was, man, this is so beautiful, these coral reefs and swimming and just going, I want my kids to be able to come and,
Absolutely.
see this. This is amazing. So, I think if we can just, like you said, be reasonable, like, we understand that plastics need to be there, but if there are other solutions that are low hanging fruit, why not pursue those? And who would be against that? Is what I'm thinking.
We tend to act impulsively in response to what we see as the immediate crisis,
Yeah.
and not consider the long-term consequences too. So was botulism really a crisis? I don't know if I'd go there. Do you remember the big botulism scare of the 60s? No, because it never existed.
Yeah.
But if you get botulism, it is, let's just say you don't want to get botulism. Like you might go to the hospital and not come out.
Yeah.
But then we get to, apparently there was this thing called COVID or something like that. I forget the name. Yeah. But those masks have plastics in them, all paper. And there are trillions of them out in the environment now.
Yeah. Oh my God. No. No. It was like, yeah, I would go and see them all over the place. The airport, right? You're everywhere.
And you talking about those beaches, the pretty ones and the not so nice ones. I was just thinking of North Carolina versus Jersey, and I apologize to anyone from Jersey.
I've never been to Jersey. I've been to the Carolina beaches, not Jersey. So yeah.
I like to tease. My mom's from there. I got love for Jersey, but
there you go.
it's some of those beaches just have huge piles of these masks, just huge piles. I mean, I understand they were used in hospitals. They're surgical masks, but you get 6 billion people wearing them all the time. That adds up real fast, and they're single use generally, and then they start getting mixed in with medical waste, and you got needles in there. I mean, you're arguably making the situation worse in the immediate future and in the long-term future.
No. So, Rob, what are solutions? We're a solution company, right? Data solutions. What are we trying to help people with?
So I think there's a few possibilities. One, some companies, and it isn't a corporate movement yet the way something like greenhouse gas reduction is, but it is definitely starting to take hold. You're seeing companies trying to reduce or eliminate single-use plastics. And just like we talked about with the power plant rule, how that's not going to solve the whole problem, that is more than a drop in the bucket. It's a significant step. I think the next thing you're going to have to see is a willingness to make trade-offs on recycling plastics. And even if we stopped producing plastics this second, no more plastics, we have to deal with all the plastic that's out there. And that there's no perfect way to do that.
No.
So recycling innovation. And then third, technology really needs to start exploring solutions for plastic that I hate to say are more environmentally friendly, because that's what is your priority. But what I would say is that don't have such a long-term footprint. So for example, like you said, the beach wouldn't allow glass on the beach, but that's because they don't want people cutting their foot. Glass is actually really easy to recycle. What's wrong with going back to glass? I'll be honest with you, stuff tastes better in glass anyway.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that going back to glass is the solution to our plastic problem, but we are not going to see, I don't think, a magic wand panacea solution to this problem in the next 5 years. We have to start looking at where can we make big inroads and then acting on them. And I think that starts with consumers. If consumer interest and tastes change, the market follows.
Yeah. And I think okay.
No, go ahead.
I think part of it too is it's out of sight, out of mind, right? So, for a lot of us that live in North America, I don't know where you're going to be listening from. it's easy when you don't see the repercussions of the plastic, right? Versus if it's in your face all the time. And I think, or just trash and litter in general, but, it's one of those things where I think about, it's easy when it's not in your face. You're like, who cares? But when you've seen it, it really just goes, wow, this is an issue. It's hard to contain. It's hard. So where can we start? Like it says, lowest hanging fruit, trying to clean that up.
The other thing,
and then move up the chain.
Follow up on that point though. What we need to do is have unfettered research into what the impact really is. So if ovarian cancer rates start spiking, is that because of plastic in the environment? I have no idea. And I'm not saying that it is. I in no way claim to be an oncologist, a medical expert, an endocrine expert, but I do know that the plastic lobby is paying regulators a whole lot of money, or politicians. Remember, there's a lot of money that goes into this because it's a very big business, to make sure that the studies that might look bad for them never happen. Yeah. BPA was legal in the US in every form for a very, very long time based on one study funded by the chemicals industry. And the FDA ignored countless studies that countered that study because that was the gold standard one, again, funded by the industry that's making these plastics. So I think we need to know what we're up against. Yep. Then we need a nuanced approach. So you say first step, there are some plastics that are food grade, more recyclable, easier to manage. Maybe we don't worry about those ones first. Let's look at the ones that are causing the most problem. And then let's look at ways to redirect the plastic that we have. So the kid who's making the bracelets and cleaning up the ocean is an awesome solution, but like vinyl siding, for example, in houses. You can make thicker, stronger, more durable vinyl siding. You got to be able to recycle the plastic, but there's a huge need for housing in the United States. Housing costs are skyrocketing. There's a lack of inventory. These are easy solutions to give people much cheaper houses in terms of building materials that are also stronger and more durable. Yep. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the, I was thinking about this from my childhood. So I'm originally from Chad, Africa, and one of the things I remember as a kid was these black plastic bags all over the place in the capital city when I was about 12 or 13. They were everywhere. And, I lived there for a few years and I moved back to the States. And then I've been back a few times. What I realized last time I was there was I didn't see any plastic bags. Not really. I mean, there was trash here, of course, but the plastic bags I didn't see any. That's hyperbole. I saw some, but it was greatly reduced. And I was talking to my family, so what happens? Well, they banned those plastic bags. They were coming in from another country and people used them. And just that ban helped reduce, that trash. And, it's just one of those small examples where, a country in sub-Saharan Africa can get behind this and push it. I don't know what it looks like now, right? It's been a few years since I've been back. But the change from when I was an early teen, to the last time I was there, was pretty dramatic, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so I think if we really want to drive the solutions, we can. And so you're right about the lobbies and try to make sure that we're keeping them honest about a lot of this stuff. I think that goes a long way, even if it's just a little country like Chad that benefits from it. I think that's great. And so, let's move forward. So.
I think you make actually a beautiful point there. We didn't create this in 2 years. Yep. So we're not going to solve it in 2 years. Any attempt to solve this overnight is disingenuous, counterproductive, and it just needs to stop. Yep. We need a solution that moves us in the other direction. And then it took time to get here. It takes time to get us out. So from your teenage years to when you went back recently, a couple of decades. But the change is significant over that period of time.
Yeah, it's not perfect by any stretch of imagination, right? You still see trash and plastic, but it's so much more reduced than it was. Like, wow, this is pretty interesting. So, yeah.
You reminded me of a couple other things before we let everyone go. So one, a couple of years ago, I'm pretty sure China announced that they were no longer going to accept trash from the United States and Canada. So they had been taking a lot of our unrecyclable trash, and I think that created much more of a trash problem. But it doesn't mean it can't be dealt with. Sweden, I think it's 90%. I'm not 100% on the number, but they burn almost all of their trash. And they do it in a fairly environmentally friendly way. They use high temperatures. There's a lot that goes into it, but then they don't have a trash problem.
Right.
No, we are so afraid of solutions. I mean, again, not to get political, but I'm convinced that we're afraid of solutions because if politicians don't have solutions, or if they have solutions and they don't have problems to scare us to run on.
Yep. Well, I think that's the theme of our podcast. Is stop politicizing it. Let's find solutions.
Yes.
Let's just find, hey guys, what's reasonable, and let's find solutions, and let's try not to cause downstream problems, but think it through. But just staying at status quo is not acceptable. That's what I think we've got to work through. I think if I think if you just sit down, and that's what we love to do here at OWL ESG. So another plug is look at the data. We are looking at plastic and recycling data here at OWL as well to see how we can help in this fight. But it's just going not only what can I do as a consumer, but what can companies do to help alleviate some of this. And like you said, even if we stop today producing single-use plastic, we still have a long way of so guys like a young man like Slat here from Holland that found a solution and is making a difference. And so I think we all can do that in our own way. He actually has ocean barges out there cleaning up, and we collect data and chase data to make sure we're helping our clients stay ahead of it as well. So.
I think that is actually the perfect thing to end on. OWL ESG, most accurate, most transparent, most freshest data, but the most objective. There's no politics going into this. We want to see things move in the right direction, objectively, based on the numbers. We understand there are trade-offs. There's always sacrifices that have to be made. A lot of work went into getting us here. It doesn't seem like work because it was profitable, it was good, but doesn't mean it can't be that way going out. So we put out calls to action. We want to see consumer-driven, market-driven solutions, but consumer-driven means business structured. So the consumer says, I want this, the businesses do it. And with OWL's data, you can see which businesses are actually walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Right.
Well, Monsieur, wonderful discussion. That was a good one.
I love your jacket, by the way. You showed me up last time, so Mr. Rob here showed me up our last podcast, so I have to go dust off the jacket.
Place up.
Look respectable. So no, it was as always, it's great to chat, and I learned. It's amazing what we learned by doing this, right, Rob? So hopefully you guys learn it as well. So.
Well, everyone watching, thank you for joining us. And please tune in next time when we will have another interesting ESG related discussion.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Take it easy.